Sometimes I find myself speaking in too technical language for people to understand. Because when you are exposed to all the technology, everything around you, which is in this area and domain, it feels natural for you to discuss on the same terms, but people don't understand it. Okay, so let's go back a little on what are you actually doing at your company, and how do you see the impact of AI within people jobs, people skills, and what should people look into the future regarding their own development?
Oh, for a living. Oh man, I try to be helpful. So number one mantra I say to myself in the morning is there's no distance between self and I, and that's sort of a collapsing fallback kind of language. And then the second thing is that
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Vibe It Up, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of tech. I'm your host, Dan Tudorache, and I bring over 20 years of experience in the software development industry, wearing multiple hats as solution architect, leadership coach, trainer, and now as a psychologist too. So, you might be wondering, what the vibe all about? Well, the vibe is not a podcast, it's a community, a space where we connect with tech professional, industry professional, from seasoned experts to visionary directors of engineering, architects, software architects, and inspiring team leaders. So the vibe, it's about the people which are creating the value in this world. We have with me today Jon Salisbury. Hello, John. Welcome.
how are you? Thanks for having me.
Sure, my pleasure. How are you, John? How was your day?
So far, so good. Got up and got the morning routine and started going at it. The morning, I feel like you just need to conquer that, and then it sets up the rest of the day.
Oh, awesome! I love that. I love that. I'm also the adept of the uh, early morning routine. It requires discipline, and I can see you already have it.
I don't know if it's like discipline feels like this resistance thing to me. Like, oh, I have to achieve it, and then I feel like once you get into that state, it's more of a reward. So you just enjoy it, and it's more about like a flowing kind of like lead with love type thing.
Yeah. So you get the reward from the process. Awesome. Awesome. Then we read the same books. Okay, who is John?
Gosh, that is a good question, and I've been asked that a few times, and I feel like I can answer it well now. So I study Buddhism, um, and that takes you to who and what you are, and that's an interesting answer I could give in multiple ways. So the perception of John from an identity construct and so forth is someone that looks inward for love and then tries to express that outward. And that is the goal, to stay in that type of flow. Um, I'm curious. I like to explore, so that's more of a forward kind of like momentum, and it's almost obsessive. So because I love to learn new things, and I've become a lifelong learner, and there's a reward mechanism in there too, right? So I almost have to intentionally break and get to like emptiness, or like a more of an internal exploration, to make sure that I stay in sync and don't go out of control. That's really how it works.
Awesome. I love this perspective of yourself and how you put it. And it seems you are some psychology literate, or not only psychology but also other.
Well, my wife runs a mental health practice. She owns it and has her master's. And then also, I've read a lot and studied a lot in that area. So her and I talk about stuff. I use slightly different technical language, more from the Buddhism aspect, and then she uses all of the traditional psychology. So she's always saying, "What are you talking about? Like that doesn't make sense." And then we'll find alignment.
I see. Okay. So, speaking of Buddhism, what do you understand by spirituality in your perspective, conception?
So that's people feel like it's outward to start, but I feel like you start with an inward journey and it's within you. And it sort of speaks to consciousness in my mind and experience and how those two things have a relationship. Um, and it's sort of this magical thing that life is, and it's not explainable. Like, why does everything exist? Like all these big questions you have, right? Why are we here? Who made this? And I feel like you can see expressions of it in the world. So there's like these patterns and fractal patterns. I like to say, like, you look in someone's eyes extremely closely, and when you do, you see this beautiful pattern that comes to life. And then you look out through a telescope through and look at a galaxy across the millions of light years away, and it looks the same. And there's this pattern that almost becomes like an identifiable system. Like you look at your thumbprint, and then you line it up. You cut a tree in half, and then you line it up with the tree rings, and it's like, wow, that same pattern's there. But you see it everywhere. It's in our evolutionary cycle. It's in DNA structure. It's in everything. But we almost just like throw it away. Well, whatever that is, and whatever is guiding that, I call love. And then the thing that's guiding that, I call God. And that's how it expresses itself, and that's called beauty. So that's how I look at it.
Awesome. Some everybody understands something different by spirituality. Some people understand only religion, although it's different than religion. But yeah, it's more than that, and it's the connection with the nature, with connection with the universe, it's connection with everything around us and with ourselves in the first place.
You're in unison with it, whether you want to be or not. Like, try to escape this moment. Like, go ahead and try. Right? Is it possible? And then, is there only one moment that's always existed? It just moves through time, probably. And that same moment is where our ancestors lived and so forth. And we're in it now, and we better enjoy it.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so what does John for a living?
Oh, for a living. Oh man, I try to be helpful. So number one mantra I say to myself in the morning is, "There's no distance between self and I," and that's sort of a collapsing fallback kind of language. And then the second thing is that everything else is connected to me. Thus, I need to be as helpful as I can to everyone I meet, because that's really helping myself. So the best way to help everyone else is to be the best version of myself, and point the finger back at myself. So I have a team that I created in 2002 with a company called Nexigen, and it's an innovative company that does new stuff. We always are on the next technology, or slightly ahead of it, or maybe just slightly behind it, but right in that front area. And that's Nexigen. You'll see the shirt here. Um, so we do cybersecurity, managed IT solutions, cloud solutions, and now artificial intelligence deployments. From Nexigen, which has 80 some people and is growing, we also have launched a payroll company, Pay Options, which services payroll to 48 states in the United States. And there's a platform that we're associated with. Then we created a smart city company, which has many hundreds, maybe of 1,000 8-foot tall iPhone-ish looking units that are around the country, and they act as virtual ambassadors in cities. And then we have some real estate programs that we work with, but and that's a separate organization as well. And then my wife's mental health practice. But my day to day is at Nexigen, and it's really ensuring that my customers get great experience from a service standpoint. My employees get growth and cheerleading every day, so they're challenged and then supported through that. And then that the products and services that are coming, or new risks or new challenges that are coming into the marketplace that my customers will have to deal with, I will deal with them first. And then my team will understand them first. And then we'll organize that, structure that in a responsible, digestible way. And then we'll roll that out to our customers. And we're kind of the guinea pigs on ourselves. So we're constantly in a lab working on new stuff. 6 months later, our customers then see that technology, and we can explain it to them in a way that they understand. They then move forward with confidence, because we give them a level of understanding. A lot of what I feel like in the cybersecurity industry is pointing to some sort of policy, pointing to some sort of challenge between countries, creating a sense of fear, and then trying to get you to react to that fear. So we actually do it the exact opposite way. We try to develop a level of understanding, calm, and reasonableness, and then let's make informed decisions and move forward and understand where our risk is. So that's the approach we took, and we feel like it's a more loving approach, to be honest.
Yes, indeed. I sometimes I find myself speaking in too technical language for people to understand. Because when you are exposed to all the technology, everything around you, which is in this area and domain, it feels natural for you to discuss on the same terms, but people don't understand it. So if they understand AI, it's okay, but through AI, they understand someone different things. Anyone understands different. So how and indeed. Okay. uh, yes. How does a day from your life at the company looks like? What are the three main things that you are focusing?
Number one is when you enter the door and say hello. I say hi to everyone in the building. Personally, I ask them how they're doing. Um, I give them a high five. I ask them about their kids. It takes me 35 minutes to get to my desk every morning. So that's intentional. And that's to make sure everybody knows, who I am, and that I care about them, and that they're important to our team. And then second thing is really dive into work blocks. And then work blocks are one, social media, communicate out what we're learning. Two, demoing vendors and talking to partners, and then working on more complicated or more important opportunities. And then end of day is making sure communication is out about what's occurred and everybody's ready for the next day, and then turning into father and trying to pray the whole day throughout.
Amazing. So, as I understand, you value um, connection with people, with employees, with your family. It's a deep value of yours, right?
I feel like it's like Alan Watts used to say this. It's like the magic is in the relationship, and the relationship is almost hidden. So it's this invisible thing that exists between people, and it's cool. I actually heard this the other day. Is that invisible relationship? That's where communication occurs. That's where we interact. That's where someone may be stressed. We may not be. We might be in different kind of synchronizations. We might be coming off a hard meeting. They're coming off a super easy, relaxing lunch. When you interact, that invisibleness occurs, and that's the magic. And that's where emotional intelligence is. You're looking at signs of, is the person looking at me? Is their mouth twitching? Is their foot bouncing? Is their their hands kind of, and people try to hide their tells, right? And they want to be like obscured from your view, right? But that's impossible. So that magic exists in understanding that those invisible tells, and then reacting accordingly. So that means you have to be really good at centering yourself and making sure that you're not overdoing it or pushing or those types of things. But in my mind, connectedness is there like so thick and empirically, um, that we just miss it a lot of times. So you just have to slow down to be in the movement and pay attention.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Um, I wanted to ask you, have you been always like that? I mean, how did you start it, and what was your journey until here?
I have a weird journey. So my parents were both Christian, and I was brought up in a strong Christian value kind of household. My dad was an assistant pastor, and um, I was always kind of struggled with traditional learning mechanisms in school and following a standard curriculum. I always was an explorer and like to do things kind of like a different way. So I struggled in school. I actually did not do well in school, and I was excelling in athletics, and I played sand volleyball to the level that was pretty high, and ended up thinking I would be a pro. So I went out to California and Florida and played on AVP qualifying series, which is American Volleyball Professionals, like right out of high school. Um, and then from there, actually left high school early, got my GED, so I didn't actually complete high school. Um, but during high school and after, I've always read a lot. So I ended up not making it on volleyball. I'm not 6'5", and I'm not built like Michael Jordan, right? And I don't have his physical skills, but I did well, and I was a hard worker. And my dad, who I made cry when I made this decision to leave high school to go be a professional athlete, which he said you're crazy. Um, he said if you're going to do this, you're going to do it, which means you wake up at 5 a.m., you go work out, you eat right, you train 3 times a day, you push yourself to the max, and you see if you can actually do it. So you actually explore it fully. So he supported me in that effort, which is, I don't know if I'd do that with my kids and have the courage, but he supported the heck out of me. So I did that for about 2 years. I came back and I didn't know what to do, but I'm highly active and energetic. And my old coach in Cincinnati was starting a restaurant. So I decided to jump in on that and became a restaurateur at like 19, 20 years old. And we ended up launching a few restaurants in the area. And I learned how to make sandwiches and order inventory and work with vendors about stock, create an inventory system, how a point of sale system works, how you manage other people. I learned some invaluable lessons, but it was really boring. I didn't get to explore new things or complicated topics that kind of like seemed to itch for me. So I took off from that, and it continued to run. And I went into like I guess my kind of exploratory years, and I was bartending and bar backing and those types of things. And I met some philosophers and really interesting people, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea. So I was good at chess though. It's something I played with my dad and I learned and I'd gotten pretty good at. And we'd go to these parties and there'd be a chessboard. And when there was, I'd play chess all night. And there would be all these guys at these parties that would come in, and I'd usually win at chess for like 5, 6 hours. And I ended up becoming friends with them. And one of the guys was a tech entrepreneur. And after like 6 months, he's like, dude, you're just bartending and you read all the time and you beat me in chess nonstop. What are you doing with your life? Like, what do you want to do? What's your goal? What are your plans? Who are you? He asked me the same kind of questions you asked me. And after thinking about it, I said, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I should do. And he said, well, go into technology. You're never going to stop learning. You got a good acumen and a good mind. Go after it. And he gave me a specific path. So at that point, I called my dad and I said, hey, you're retiring from teaching. You want to do something still after retiring from teaching. Do you want to go to school together? And he said, yeah. So we went to school together and got our certifications and Microsoft systems engineer, Cisco certified, all these types of things. Then I went into the workforce, and so did my dad as a technologist. Ended up at Best Buy because the corporate enterprise IT world wasn't really like where I liked at that age. So I started my own company as a consulting firm, and then worked at Best Buy on the tech bench as like a side job to kind of like while I'm doing my own thing, and met my business partner. And at that Best Buy, it was insane. So there was every single guy who worked at Best Buy at that age now works as like a CIO or like a director, or one guy's running the project team for Microsoft Azure globally out of Chicago. He's a good friend of mine. Um, and we've all kind of gone off to do these really cool things, but we were all at this little Northern Kentucky Best Buy selling technology because I guess that's where the geeks hung out, right? So from there, then we started Nexigen, and then the journey kind of began in the business world. So just an awkward beginning. Most people do a traditional schooling, they do traditional like mentorships and so forth, and I kind of had this different way about it. But my approach and what I've learned and how I learn, I get to learn about a lot of different things. So you kind of build these knowledge towers in different areas. And I have a lot of diverse knowledge towers. And I'm able to kind of combine them and look at problems in different ways than most people. And I typically don't fall into some of the rule sets that kind of fall into place for them after like being coached into them so often. So I've heard when I interact with people, they're like, "Hey, you kind of made a move there that we typically wouldn't make," and that's been an advantage if I have the conviction and courage to follow those things.
Wow. Yeah. And as it seems you had a trigger when you started this path. The growth of yours occurred when someone pointed you in the right direction for you.
If you listen, everyone's trying to. Can we get out of our own way and just listen? And at that point, I was lucky enough to be listening to someone with some really solid wisdom who's become a lifelong friend. But today, my goal is to listen more. I know I speak a lot. I'm not afraid to speak, but when someone's talking, what is this important wisdom that I'm supposed to learn at this moment that's going to make my life better in the future?
Yeah. And if just supposedly that one doesn't have a chance to meet a guy with experience to guide them, or I don't know, said for okay, you're good at that, go into that this direction, what should they do? They, in the end.
We've got so much content online and unbelievable wisdom on YouTube and information sharing online with blogs and so forth. If you're curious and you decide I'm going to learn from other people, there are more unbelievable people speaking about unbelievable topics, just like yourself on this podcast. Um, it's easy to find teachers in my mind, easier than ever before. And they don't you don't have to necessarily be even in the same room with them, but I find that a lot of people that become curious and want to learn from these top level teachers, they'll kind of gravitate towards each other. So when you're at a party or you're at a social function, you'll start talking about the things you're learning, and you'll naturally gravitate towards people that are doing the same journey, and you become friends if you have the courage to interact with people and talk about what your personal interests are.
Hmm. Yeah. So In my view, and I totally agree on that. That you attract the same energy as you put your focus into.
It's a wave, yeah. It's yeah. What you put out in the world comes back. So if you're putting out love, you'll get hit sometimes. I mean, life beats you up, but I think people recognize that hidden kind of relationship thing. It's actually it breathes life into the world. You're pushing love out.
Mm, yeah, indeed. Okay, so let's go back a little on what are you actually doing at your company, and how do you see the impact of AI within people jobs, people skills, and what should people look into the future regarding their own development? Because AI will have a huge.
Yeah, big time. So I started my AI journey a long time ago. A long time ago. And I was reading about Turing and John von Neumann and other big time AI guys that were like originators of concepts and so forth. And I've followed people like Jason Lanier, Demis Haspis, Ilya Stutzfors, I think is probably mispronouncing that name. These are the guys who run AI at Google, guys that run AI at OpenAI, who created virtual reality and so on, and they're around today, like Jason, Demis, and Ilya. And those guys put information out on YouTube all the time. So you can just learn from the Einstein of AI directly. You don't have to even have an intermediary. So they've been working on AI for like machine learning, neural nets, deep learning kind of like procedures for years, and we've been using it in cybersecurity for like a decade. And we've been automating tasks and so forth in the cybersecurity world for a long time. But in November of 2022, a new type of technology came out, and that's OpenAI, their generative technology, and that's a whole different ballgame. And when I first interacted with it, I was really taken off guard. I didn't realize that it had progressed that fast. I assumed it was coming, like I had read the singularity is near, and I'd seen the forecasts, but this jump felt a little bit like whiplash. Like I was like almost not ready to see it, even though I've read about it my whole life with all the sci-fi novels and technical manuals I've read. So I explored it. First 2 weeks in OpenAI, I was in it for 40 hours for 2 weeks. Uh, I was in it nonstop, just trying to test limits, trying to test boundaries. And I was actually surprised that everybody else wasn't. I thought everyone would be just as curious. So I looked at it as this amazing tool, and almost like instead of a tool, it's almost like a painting because it's trying to replicate a human. So you could almost look at it as like someone trying to paint the Mona Lisa, and they're trying to get every detail and the wrinkle of the mouth right, and they're trying to recreate that moment of reality exactly as it is, but they're trying to replicate you in a different way, so it's a different kind of painting, right? And immediately fell in love, and then I also was scared. um, Everyone on their journey with AI, I feel like, has three different zones that exist. One is like fear and doom. This thing is just going to grow and destroy us. And then a second one you run into is like, hey, let's regulate it and put all these governing principles in place and slow it down. And then there's another group called accelerators, and they're saying put the foot to the pedal to the on the gas and just run as fast as you can. And I started in fear and moved to decel and am now in full acceleration, um, which is strange because I think there's a blend between the regulation and full acceleration, but I think it kind of works itself out in a lot of ways from a capitalistic standpoint. The problem is that you just create a lot of messes along the way. So everything I say is wrong. Everything. I literally cannot tell anything but a lie. Like it's almost impossible to say things precisely the way you mean them. We have limited word usage and how we use words, right? It's just not. it's very hard to articulate. The closest we can get is mathematics, and still even it is like not 100% precise. So with AI, it's always going to be, especially generative, it's always going to say things or do things that are slightly off of this like agreed upon reality that we all agree upon. But it's an amazing tool and can automate and do all of these other wonderful things. It's just it'll create a tremendous amount of messes along the way. The idea is how do we forecast where those messes are, and then how do we clean them up and keep moving in a positive direction? Is there a way to decel it and get it to a point where it stops? I actually think we're past that point. Uh, we would have been maybe 2 years ago, but it's just not possible. So you get into all these weird conversations. So I'm a part of the Plunk Foundation, and the Plunk Foundation is about privacy. And I'm an advisor over there. And John Kavanaugh, who runs that, is a brilliant guy who's working on this next level privacy. So AI is like Pac-Man. It literally goes around and gobbles up everything you send to it data wise. It wants to learn it and understand it, and then it turns around and it's like a 15-year-old kid with a megaphone, and it wants to tell everybody everything it learned. That's literally its function. I want to tell everybody everything. You ask me a question, I'm going to tell you every little thing I possibly can about. That's its goal in life. So it becomes a tremendous security problem, but also a privacy issue. So if people don't realize this. Did you watch the Batman series with Christopher Nolan with Morgan Freeman? Do you remember when Morgan Freeman and Batman were ready to go after the Joker and they couldn't find him? And Christian Bale's character, Batman, said, "Hey, we got to record all the conversations on the cell networks." And Morgan Freeman was like, "I can't do that. That's unethical. I'm not going to record all the conversations." They did. He's standing in front of a bunch of video screens, and he's having this big moral dilemma. And he's like, "We need to save these people's lives. We've got to find him." So they turn it on and they record all these conversations. It's like this big moral dilemma. That's what's happening when you interact with OpenAI. The value in AI and the new way that you do software development is that you create a data stream, you put it in place, it learns everything about the internet, which includes who says things. So they really are working on cleaning it, right? Cleansing it and organizing so it doesn't that we kind of like obfuscate or abstract that information out. But then on top of that, when they build it, they don't really know how it works. So they need the usage data to understand how to improve the product. So instead of the old way where we used to build software in this nice directional approach, now it's like, hey, let's do this, let's get usage data, and then we'll have this giant jump, and then it'll feel like a whiplash to the user, and then we'll get more usage data on that, and then we'll have another giant jump. So it's almost reverse of SDLC, software defined lifecycle. But they get that through these chat logs and they're recording conversations. Now they try to, I'm sure they're using a technique to abstract identities, but is everyone? And people can have large language models all over the place and they're being put into every application. Is everyone using the same responsible AI techniques that maybe Google would use or that's publicly traded and has scrutiny and oversight by the government? Now some random person can spin up a large language model, create an application, suck in the data. They're literally like Verizon recording everything that comes in and out, and they can keep that for perpetuity. Is that reasonable? Should there be those types of governing principles in place? Yeah, for sure. And then the second one is there's a relationship we have with AI, which is kind of different than traditional software. Traditional software, you log in, it has a user interface, you click some drop downs, you have to learn the UI, and then you start interacting with it, and it becomes a tool. This new system is just like a prompt, or you use your voice, or shoot, you're working with a robot, right? It's more like, and it's never really 100% accurate. It's kind of like it's mostly right or partially right, or maybe exceeds your expectations. You're in control. So I take that relationship and I pair it to riding a horse. So like, or a musical instrument. So like a musical instrument is like one of the best user interfaces you can interact with. In fact, there's measurements that show that a violinist with a bow on the violin string, it's approaching quantum limit in the accuracy and precision that they're interacting with. We're talking like insane precision. Like that user interface is beautiful. With a horse may be rounding up like 50 cattle, right? And the cowboy will sit on top of the horse, and the horse may be running 35 miles an hour left and right and turning on a dime, right? The cowboy up top, he's smoking a cigarette like a Zen Buddhist. He's just relaxing, like, hey, get over here. Like, let's go to the left. And he's got a saddle and he's learned that relationship, right? And that's how I see they call it AI whisperers, but I almost think it's like a horse whisperer because this thing's not quite 100% in control. It's mostly, but then we kind of learn to ride it and interact with it and have a relationship with it. And that's kind of the new user interface. But I saw that out of a seminar from a European university leader who was talking about the relationship with it. So I took that from them. But it's a beautiful analogy, in my opinion, of how we interact with it. It's not a mouse and keyboard anymore. It's a totally different interface. It's more like dealing with another human, which gives us some of that invisible, tangible, like intangible type of cues. Like, is this thing in a bad mood today? I don't know if it has a mood, but sure seems like it does sometimes.
Indeed, yeah, I love the analogy with riding a horse and letting the horse slide where they want to, but you being in charge on the top of that. I mean, but how does that all this field and all those models and so on, how does affect the skill development of people?
That's user decision, right? Like, what do you want to? How do you want to use YouTube? Do you want to watch kitty cat videos jumping off of 20-foot high bridges and watch and laugh all night, or do you want to watch the MIT AI lecture series, which is online for free? There's 63 1.5 hour long videos that people pay like $300,000 to go learn in person, right? It's available on free. Like, how do you want to use that tool? Do you want to learn from Edward Witten, the top physicist in the world, or do you want to watch Joe Rogan's uh, crazy concept that he has at the time? I love Joe Rogan, but it's not always going to be Edward Witten, right? So, like, well, how do you want to use it? So, with me, AI is a simplification tool. So you kind of take your data that's very complex and wide and kind of hard to organize, and it filters down into an area where you can kind of understand things. So you can take really crazy data sets and complicated, even philosophical questions and so forth, and it can simplify them very quickly. And it kind of gives you a direction then on that simplification. So that's one way that I think that's really nice. And then it also can teach you. So you can have it teach you all sorts of things. Um, are you sure it's right when it's telling you that they're getting better at that? So you end up in this three things that exist, and I'll make sure I get them right. Um, there's three main things you need to have when you know an AI is working properly, and Perplexity AI is pretty good at this. But number one is explainability, directability, and verifiability. So you're getting like citations and these kind of things like brought back with the actual response, and then you're getting better accuracies and so forth. So you right now, the way I use it is I have it help write on occasion. I have it generate images, and then I explore complicated papers. So every day there's a new AI paper coming out that's 220 pages long about some crazy topic. How do you read 220 pages every day? You can't. So you take the 220 and you put it in AI and you say, "Hey, summarize this," and you start asking questions of the content, and then it kind of explains it to you, and then you go verify that it's actually giving the right information. But you can speed up the process of understanding the 220 pages into like a 5 or 10 minute activity versus like an hours of long conversation, right? So I would assume people in the future are going to be able to understand information very quickly, like the key points that matter to them, and be able to move forward. There's a sense of depth and like longness. I don't know how to say it, but like some people stick to a problem and just get more into it for years and decades and so forth. You're still going to need that skill, and that will be valuable into the AI pipeline and value chain, because you create value. I mean, humans are needed in the AI to work. It's copying everything we do. It's created nothing on its own yet. It's literally just combining human knowledge, right? So new human knowledge and novel human knowledge is important to I'm kind of all over the place on my response here, but there's just so many ways to like think about how this thing like interacts and works. But I would say that we're going to get value out of it in the way that we choose, and it's the most dynamic tool we've ever had to use.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. But do you feel like people in general now, because we were trained as humans in different sectors, we learned how to read and where to find the information and where to search and how to analyze everything. But how will the kids that will grow up with the AI now will be capable of analyzing the data returned by AI and thinking of that's right, that's not right? How do you think they?
I think they're going to learn to not trust what's in front of them on the screen. Like this conversation could be generated by AI in 20 years. I don't know if they're that as interested in that conversation. Um, Maybe they like the AI to speak to it like a human in this type of manner. There's a potential path that we all fall in love with the tool, like it's the best Google ever and it does it all for us, and we become zombies to it. I feel like people are going to be more enamored with nature and reality. And there's going to be that sector section of people that really get into experience and so forth. And they use that the same way we do today. And I feel like there's some people that'll be trapped in the matrix, so to speak. Um, if we do it responsibly, there's governing principles around all of that, right? And if people, is this a new addiction? Like I'm addicted to being told I'm lovely by 1,000 different faces every day. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, we will see. uh,
I don't know if they're stopping it. That's a challenge, right? So that's a brave new world.
no, no, but yeah, from where I started on this topic on the impact of human development and human skills development in terms of in general terms of how do they perceive themselves, how do they perceive the exterior, the world and everything around that, how will they do their job, how do they approach a task or not. Of course AI will be there to guide them toward the to do more efficiently everything. In this regard, yes, but the other human skills I don't feel like it's helping the AI.
It might not be. I think that's a target that we need to aim for, right? And there needs to be strong psychologists and leaders in that space that become a voice that direct it that way. But I was talking to a friend who works. He's got like 15,000 developers at his organization, and they've had a 40% increase in productivity with Code Assist alone. So they're able to charge like 5% less, and their margins are increasing with charging less. They're also using other automated tasks all over the place, right? And they're hiring more people because they can handle more work. So I would say that there's that piece. Then there's all sorts of other like potential negative pieces where it's like basically ripping off every artist in history, right, to create images. Um, are we now using the graphic designer that we can do 10 iterations for? So I find my relationship changing with the graphic designers. I never get exactly what I want out of AI, but I get a lot of direction and precision, right? So I then send that to the artist, and then the artist has a lot more clarity. It's not me just giving them some horrible pictures I've tried to draw and do on or like a bad version on Photoshop, I'm actually giving them some precision to the, so it's actually helpful to them. Even for my website, we did a bunch of AI writing on the website and then turned that over to a copywriter out of New York, and then they wrote it correctly. But they had a hell of a lot more direction, and the outcome of it was much better. So it actually enabled the human, and I call that human in the loop. And that's sort of in my mind what it takes is that you have a human in the loop of the process, and it enables them to do better and more, and you can communicate better and more. So that's where I kind of see it interacting as that relationship, that horse.
The cowboy style. Okay. It's too early for that. Uh, I see. But thinking of skills and people and companies that could increase and are increasing the speed of work and efficiency in this way, what are the main skills and traits you are seek into new hire new people that you are coming to your company?
That's a great question. So I see so many opportunities now to hire more people. It's insanity. It's actually increased the our ability to hire and what we need. So that was a question though I had to answer for myself and my company and find a way to move forward with AI. So my first concern was is how do you secure this thing? Um, how do you provide not use it to provide security, but secure it itself? Put a nice saddle on it. And I spent a lot of time on that question, and I figured that part out. So we then Nexigen partnered with the top AI security tool on the planet. It's a group called Calypso AI, and we then create. I almost look at the LLMs as stars, and then I look at the security tools as Dyson spheres, and that's a weird way to look at it, but that's how I do it. And then from there, we cover it and then provide guardrails, and we use other AI to protect it. And then we can really control that thing. So the horse is really moving on a dime for you, and it's not going to say things you don't want. It's not going to go off the rails. And if it does, we detect that. And then I have humans that go in and make sure it doesn't go off the guardrails again. And that's a new security operations center. And that's a new prompt engineering slash RLHF or human reinforcement learning program that we've put in place to become a new type of security operations center for the new AI world. And we're one of the first in the country. So I need more humans to do that. And I'll need a ton. And that's really cool that we have a future at Nexigen that requires a lot of humans, and it's going to grow like crazy. So we're really excited about that, and I feel like it aligns with good because it keeps the LLMs on track and under control, and it increases their ability to be accessible and deployed because people will trust the technology more with the solutions we're putting in place.
Yeah. Indeed, and yeah, human annotation was used since the models and starting the models and so on, but now you use human annotation on the answers from and the results of interaction with AI. And
So you ground it in humanity, right? So like it has its own imagination. It'll combine an astronaut with a chipmunk, right? And like give you an image, right? So like a human has a tough time kind of imagining that, but it can do it very quickly. So there's it has towers of knowledge. So do you I don't know how technical you want me to get on here, but I can give you like an analogy in layman's terms that's somewhat technical of how it works.
how much you feel safe and for audience, it's okay.
Deep learning is like a flat pizza grid of data that you put like in this section, and there's like you can move around it, right, and through it, right, but then you start stacking those pizzas on top of each other on a specific domain knowledge set, right, and you end up with a tower of knowledge about a specific domain. In fact, it's so good it can beat a human in chess because that tower is big enough to encompass chess, right? What generative does is it has the ability to have multiple towers in many domains, right? And when you search it, it queries all of those towers and then creates a new one in its response, and it builds it from a combination of the others and then expresses that outwardly, if that makes sense. But when it goes to do the combination, it gets hallucinations because it's not sure which tower it's pulling from exactly and how that lines up without shit. So it'll bring in just random things on occasion. It'll feel random, but it's just pulling from a tower that it thought was associated with that conversation. It doesn't have the same experience that we have in reality, so it doesn't know exactly how we experience reality. It's making a guesstimate, right? So the way that it knows what reality is through our chat logs. We explain or through data we produce. So when we interact with it, it looks at that as part of the relationship, and you use that as a grounding source so that it responds. It's using similar language in kind. That allows you to then adjust this thing per region, per locality, per country, per language, per generation, and it can kind of stay with us in a dynamic manner. And then that can kind of reorient the weights that it uses to explore its internal towers of knowledge, if that makes sense. That might be too technical.
No, it's it's okay. And then I was now thinking about the other ideas of putting humans to verify the AI answers and um, everything from there. That you put another AI to verify the results from AI, and you automate everything in this regard.
Well, you can use it itself, so you reverse its flow. So you bring the conversations in, they go through a guardrail system, which is a database. I don't want to accept personally identifiable information. I don't want to accept secrets for my company. I don't want to accept exploits, someone sending in code that's bad. That way, then it translations back out to a code assist. I can spoil the data pool by sending in all this hacking stuff. Then the coder goes to write its code and it introduces that code into the thing that assists it. And then now I've introduced an exploit through using code assist through an LM, right? So it's all a relationship. You have guardrails which block all that, right? But you then measure the output of the LLM against the guardrails by the LLM itself because it's contextually aware, right? Thus, you can then trigger detection points of where it's failed to do so within itself. So you can use the tool in, out, sideways, vertically, upside down, a million different ways. Um, or you can bring in outside tools that are built in instead of having that broadness, they're just one tower of information. So those are just deep learning filters or hybrid filters. So in my mind, it's generative AI, and then there's a bunch of hybrid AI that you use as governing or filters. So like think of water. You send water from Michigan for whatever reason. If you wanted to send water from Michigan to Cincinnati, which is a pretty far distance in the United States, it's going to go through originally a clean source of water or a dirty source of water, and then through filters, then through pipes, and then more filters. It'll go into larger pipes and then smaller pipes, and then eventually it gets to me, and it's clean. So that's the same thing. It's just context is the new filter. And deep learning is the way that you adjust context and steer it towards whatever grounding principles you have. So in my mind, there's guardrails on each individual LLM that each person has. There's a rating system that comes up that starts rating all of these in certain ways. And then there's a network, which then has guardrail principles on top of it. And then we use filters to steer it into some pool of humanity, which becomes the governor of that trust network. And then we score the network versus another network.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. No, it's true, but it implies a lot of complexity at the moment, and it will imply more complexity in the future because of the extra checkings, extra layers of safety and security and so on. So yeah, to create an ethical and to be as you envision to be that the AI, you need those tools.
That's right. It's more abstraction, but think of how abstracted we are away now. So, like, the electron that's going through the chip turns into a pixel we're looking on the screen through a magic, right? It's so abstracted. So that is the removal. You end up in all these philosophical questions. I mean, it's just insanity sometimes when you think about the amount of complexity we've introduced to simplify or to enhance the connectedness. Like, I think it comes back to that. We want to feel connected, and we have a hard time accepting that we already are. And so we try to create all these tools to make that feeling come. And to me, when you feel connected, you feel a sense of love. So do I really need to spend thousands of years to a point where I build an LLM that has all this complexity and trust to give me the feeling that I can have just by learning to sit with things and meditate? Like, it sort of seems like we're chasing in the hamster wheel.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Yeah. Okay. One quick question. If you have the opportunity to have dinner with any figure from the tech industry, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Richard Feynman, uh, by far the physicist, or like Archimedes, or maybe like Newton, or Da Vinci. I don't know. These are the guys I would be like super interested to explore their minds. But Feynman, he's dead. But if it was today, it would be Demis Hassabis. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, or Ilya from OpenAI. Those are the two I'm really into, or maybe Edward Witten, but he doesn't seem as like good of a conversationalist. Um, any of those guys, they're all just have the ability to look at things and find their purity, so to speak, or like the most simple forms of themselves, and then their thought process in doing so to me is always amazing. But Demis with he's the CEO of Google DeepMind. He's so brilliant, and the way that he's done things in his life that I've watched closely is just fascinating and amazing. And then Ilya, he's a non-dualist like I am, so he's a Buddhist, or similar to. And the way he thinks about things is more of I feel like he allows things to come to him. So he's really an anti-egoist, right? He doesn't want to force his will into the equation. He kind of allows it to come and sits back and listens well. So each guy I would like Demis is like a top chess player. So I'm going to listen to that guy all day long about strategy and kind of how he thinks about things. Then Ilya is a top meditator. So I'm going to listen to him in a totally different way. But those two guys today that are alive are probably my fave.
Yeah. Awesome, awesome. For our final thoughts, do you have some resources to recommend to our audience? I don't know, books, podcasts, movies, whatever.
Lex Friedman podcasts, 100%. He's phenomenal, and then the people that he gets on there are brilliant, and I follow a lot of them. And he's all about the love, which I like a lot. Um, there's a bunch of others that I like. From a book standpoint, there's a series by Ian Banks called the Culture Series, which is a science fiction novel, and it talks about society in a way where it's blended with artificial intelligence that might be somewhat reminiscent of what we're seeing today or in the near future. Um, and that one, I believe, is pretty cool. I think The Player of Games is like Elon Musk's one of his favorite books as well. That's from that same series. So I read it a long time ago, and I really like it.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're pretty close to wrap up. So if you have final thoughts for me, for the audience, how did you feel today? It will be grateful to hear.
I hope I didn't just talk everybody. I think that's kind of your job here to come on and spill your guts. But it was you're super inviting and comfortable, and made me feel comfortable. And I appreciate the time, and it's fun to kind of express out some of your thoughts and be asked about some challenging topics.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so and that's a wrap for today's episode of Vibe It Up. I hope you enjoyed our insightful conversation with John. And before we go, I want to extend a big thank you to our guest again for sharing his valuable experience and perspective. So, thank you very much, John. It was a pleasure.